In this module, we're going to talk about pricing strategies. And there are a number of strategies, but oftentimes they're variations of one of three main strategies: price skimming, penetration pricing, and status quo pricing. And let's go ahead and start with price skimming. Remember our demand curve. The demand curve says at various price levels, here are the various amounts of quantity demanded. The interesting thing about this is we can choose a high price that will then result in a lower quantity demanded, or a much lower price that can result in a higher quantity demanded. Well, what some companies decide to do is, since there will be some demand at a high price, let's go ahead and price it high, because we know there's going to be some demand. Now, after a period of time, they then lower the price. When they lower the price, now there's more demand. The term price skimming comes from they're skimming the cream off the top. There's going to be some demand no matter how high the price is, so we'll go ahead and price it high, skim the cream off the top, and once we've got that, then we'll go ahead and lower the price, get some more, maybe even lower the price even more, and get some more. This is known as price skimming. Can you think of an example of a product that has done this, or perhaps an industry that has done this? Consumer electronics is famous for this. And perhaps the most egregious example was at the very, very beginning of iPhone's spectacular run. The iPhone was definitely a textbook example of price skimming. When the product first came out, it was $599, and then a very, very short period of time later, they dropped it $200 to $399. It made headline news. Apple's iPhone price cuts leave mixed feelings. Some iPhone fans are delighted that it now costs $200 less, but others wonder if Apple needed to stimulate demand for the closely watched device. Yeah, they dropped it from $599 to $399, and that angered a lot of people that bought it at $599. That's one of the downsides of price skimming. You run the risk of angering prior customers. Of course, in a lot of markets, people are unaware of price changes. They've bought it and they're not looking at the market. And so it's very, very common in consumer electronics to do this. At the same time, another completely different thing is going on. They're learning more about making it, and so their costs are going down. So some of the lower price is truly a result of cost savings as a result of the learning curve, but it's also because of this phenomenon of price skimming. Now let's look at the opposite situation, penetration pricing. With penetration pricing, if you price it low, you're going to get an enormous amount of quantity demanded. This is a good strategy when you want to, and this is where the name comes from, penetrate a market. This might be especially true if there's already established competitors that you need to compete with. A great example of this is when Xbox came into the market. When Xbox came into the market, pretty much the price point of their two major competitors was $299. So they decided, let's go ahead and penetrate in a big way. They priced it at $199, significantly less than their competitors, and that allowed them to penetrate the market. Status quo pricing is very much the norm in a lot of markets. Now, status quo pricing has one of two objectives depending on where you are in the market. Status quo pricing objectives are to either maintain existing prices or to meet competition's price. If you are not the price leader, you will maintain existing prices, but then if the price leader changes price, you will probably change that immediately. A great example of that is in the beverage industry. Coke and Pepsi, they're always priced the same way. If Coke makes a pricing move, Pepsi almost always immediately follows. This is also very, very common in the airline industry. If you look at airline fares between competitors going between two cities, they almost always have the exact same fare. If you see that one is clearly the price leader, when they make a move, oftentimes the other competitors make that move as well. So those are the three major kinds of strategies: skimming, penetration, and status quo. There are some psychological issues in setting prices, and that often refers to buyers' pricing expectation. They oftentimes have internal reference points, or they use price as an indicator of quality. A great example of using price as an indicator of quality, and I mentioned this when I was talking about prestige pricing, is in the wine business. You go into a store and you pick up a bottle of wine. Oh, it's a $8 bottle of wine. This can't be very good. Oh, it's a $100 bottle of wine. This must be really good. But interestingly enough, even in that category where so many people do use price as an indicator of quality, Trader Joe's was able to introduce a very, very successful product, kind of cutting against the grain, if you will, and they called their product $2 Chuck. And the reason it was called $2 Chuck was it was $1.99 for a bottle of wine, or call it $2. That was a very, very successful product line. It was almost like anti-snobbery. I'm better than using price as an indicator of quality with regard to a purchase like wine. Another psychological pricing issue is what's often referred to as odd-even pricing. And this is pricing around a nine-figure. It's 99 cents, it's $9.99, it's $19.99. I know a lot of times you might look at that and say, well, come on, it's not $9.99, it's $10. Or a car that has a sticker that says $19,999. That's probably $21,000 once you add everything on there. But marketers use this so-called odd-even pricing all the time because it works. Yeah, there's that Xbox. It was $199.99. A penny less than $200, because it definitely does work. Some legal and ethical considerations in pricing. You want to be careful, if you're a marketer, of so-called deceptive pricing practices. You can't really have a going out of business sale if you aren't really going out of business. Bait and switch pricing is oftentimes a problem with unethical marketers, where they will advertise an incredibly low price, but when you get there, oh, it's not available at that price. Oh, but here's a similar model that is available at a higher price. Another really big issue is so-called price fixing. Now, price fixing is when two or more companies conspire to keep prices at a certain level. Price fixing, two or more companies conspire to keep prices at a certain level. There's horizontal price fixing and vertical price fixing. And let's go ahead and start with horizontal price fixing. These are with competitors. So they're on the same level, if you will. They're competitors. And one of the most extreme examples of an attempt at horizontal price fixing was in the airline industry with American Airlines and Braniff. And the reason this became such a big deal is there was a phone conversation that was caught on tape between the CEO of American, Crandall, and a top executive with Braniff, Putnam, and they were talking about airfares within an existing market. In Texas, both of them were losing money on this route. And here was their conversation. Crandall, you better believe it, Howard, but you know, the complex here ain't going to change a damn thing, all right? We can both live here, and there ain't no room for Delta, but there's no reason that I can see, all right, to put both companies out of business. Putnam, but if you're going to overlay every route of Americans on top of every route that Braniff has, I just can't sit here and allow you to bury us without giving our best effort. Crandall, oh sure, but Eastern and Delta do the same thing in Atlanta and have for years. Putnam, do you have a suggestion for me? Crandall, yes, I have a suggestion for you. Raise your damn fares 20%. I'll raise mine the next morning. Putnam, Robert, Crandall, you'll make more money and I will too. Putnam, we can't talk about pricing. Crandall, oh, expletive, Howard. We can talk about any damn thing we want to talk about. Well, actually, no, they can't talk about pricing. That's illegal. That is horizontal price fixing. Two or more companies conspiring to keep prices at a certain level. And they were caught on tape talking about that. Now, an example of vertical price fixing occurred in the compact disc industry a few years ago. Sony Music and other record labels were found guilty of trying to force pricing through distribution. In other words, it wasn't competitors that were conspiring, but they were trying to force pricing through distribution. Once you sell MSRP, manufacturer's suggested retail price, you are out of the pricing equation. But they tried to use their distribution strength to force pricing through to lower levels in distribution. Another legal and ethical consideration is what's called predatory pricing, and that's when a firm sets a very low price for the purpose of driving competitors out of business. And the easiest way to look at predatory pricing is if someone is pricing below their costs. There's no logical economic reason for that. The only reason that you might be selling for less than your cost is to drive competition out of business, and so that is illegal. But don't confuse that with so-called loss leader pricing. Loss leader pricing is when you sell one item and you can sell it below costs for promotional purposes. For example, a very, very common thing, especially like in the summer, is for a supermarket to put together a display of barbecue items, and there might be briquettes and soda and hamburger meat and hot dog meat and hamburger buns and hot dog buns and so on and so forth. And oftentimes they'll pick one or a couple of those items and sell it at a very, very low price, like hot dog buns for a dime. Well, clearly that's a come on. They're trying to entice you with that so that you'll then buy the other things at full revenue so that they'll make money. Yeah, they're losing money on the loss leader 10-cent hot dog buns, but they're making money on everything else. That's so-called loss leader pricing, and that is legal.